crisp autumn dawn in the mid-north. The kookaburras and the maggies swoop over a pastoral prize of the 19th century, still intact. From a time that brewed a tale of a young heir to a fortune who built an ornate grand folly of a country mansion, and all for a reluctant English fiancée far away who then never turned up to marry him. Was it fact or fiction? G'day, Keith Conlon on Postcards this week. Magnificent Martindale Hall. The sandstone glows in the dawn light. It stands 4 square to the east as it has for almost 120 years. It was a grand gesture by a 23-year-old who'd inherited a vast fortune, land holdings to the north of here, thousands of sheep, a personal fortune, and he could have lived off the fat of the land in England as a gentleman. He was Edmund Bowman, and his family crest is carved above the door there. He came from a long line of woodsmen and hunters from the Lakes District in England. In fact, the Latin motto translates as, "The king and the law with my bow I defend." So young Edmund Bowman began to surround himself with the trappings of an English gentleman. The hunt. He imported the first beagles into the colony so that they could hunt hares from here, and very successfully too. 12 miles of jumps they put in. There was a cricket field out here somewhere, and an English team came to play. There were polo ponies in the paddocks nearby, and he represented the colony. And peacocks strutted round the grounds here. Now, what about that story of the young lady who insisted that this grand house be built, but then didn't ever turn up to take his hand? Probably just idle gossip. He married the bank manager's daughter, Annie Cowell, just 4 years after Martindale Hall was completed. As it turns out, life was going to be grand temporarily here for them, and it can be grand temporarily for you too today, as we shall discover. Martindale Hall. It's about an hour and a half from Adelaide these days by car, just off the Clear Valley. When the squire, young Edmund Bowman, had it built, he wanted a grand English mansion, albeit in the middle of a mid-north sheep run. And he did it by the book, to wit the English Gentleman's Guide to Country Houses, which had several stipulations. It had to be large. Well, I think you'll agree it certainly qualifies. It's 30 metres just across the front there. And then the very best materials must be used. Well, this is sandstone here on the corners here. All the coins, all the work up and around the windows and so on was quarried about 6 kilometres away at Mintaro. The rest was local stone from much closer, but have a look at this terrible fretting. The good news is now is that all of the stone like that is being replaced with state heritage money. Another stipulation, the house had to have the best view. Well, they got that by coming up the hill a bit and cutting it into the side of the hill, overlooking the flats and the Wakefield River. Detailed plans for this adaptation of an Italian Renaissance palazzo were all drawn up by Ebenezer Gregg, architect of London. Young Edmund Bowman, 23-year-old with a sheep empire to run, hired a carpenter from Melbourne to build it. It took 2 years. It kept 50 to 60 men in work. And all that Gentleman's Guide suggested a cheerful village. Mintaro was already there, 3 kilometres up the road. Inside the house, simply the best. Indoor plumbing, hot and cold running water, was very flash in the 1880s. The marble mantelpiece in the drawing room won a prize at a Paris exhibition before it was shipped here. The pine doors were all hand-painted in a wood grain finish. While the plasterers were working on this amazing detail inside, stepfather was in England on a year-long shopping spree. There was a lot to buy, a couple of sets of the Royal Worcester china, all of the English oak furniture, the carpets, the lot. It came out on 11 different shiploads. Well, upstairs alone there was a lot to fill. Off this picture gallery there are something like 14 different rooms. And downstairs, the great hall below with its striking parquetry flooring served as a ballroom. All of this in 1880s money, £35,000 worth. Many millions of dollars worth today. Coming up, a picnic at Martindale Hall. The sound of George Zamfir's pan flute. It's very much the sound of the 1976 movie that took the South Australian Film Corporation to prominence in the cinemas of the West End in London, and Martindale Hall here in the mid-north to the world. See, this became Miss Appleyard's College for Young Ladies, and as the plot went, on St Valentine's Day 1900, the girls hopped into the coaches here and took off for a day out. Some of them were never to return. Very mysterious, hints of the paranormal. Why did the maths teacher and 2 students completely disappear? And was it based on fact or was it just fiction? Well, the author of the novel, Joan Lindsay, was always very evasive on the subject. In what is now an Australian film classic, of course, we see inside Miss Appleyard's college.
Unless you all deport yourselves with rather more grace and considerably less noise, Mrs. Appleyard will see to it that none of you go to Hanging Rock today.
Certainly no Hollywood happy ending for the girls of the college, but the film did help launch Peter Weir on his Tinseltown directing career. He's worked there ever since with the likes of Harrison Ford and Robin Williams. And it also made Martindale Hall probably the best known country house in Australia. At Martindale Hall in the mid-north, everything is palatial, even to the coach house and stables. The sheep station proprietor, Edmund Bowman, could drive his claret-coloured, custom-built drag all the way in with the 4 horses in front. But not for long, only about a decade in fact. The Bowman Empire was stretching further and further north with allegedly cheap land. It got right up into the arid lands round Lake Torrens when a combination of drought and debt rising faster than the wool clip could keep up meant that eventually the bank said all this has to be sold, and it was in 1891. So when you come to see Martindale Hall today, especially the interiors, you're seeing the Mortlock house and their furniture and decorating. Originally bankers in England, the first Mortlocks here became enormously rich by buying cheap land for sheep in South Australia. And another young heir, William Tennant Mortlock, was 26 when he inherited the bulk of the estate. He bought Martindale Hall to be his home with Rosina, his wife of just 1 year, and he ran the estate from here. On his death, his son, John Mortlock, took over, and he lived here as a bachelor with his mother till she died in 1939. And only after that did he marry his secretary, Dorothy Beach. With no heirs, though, when John T. Mortlock died in 1950, several $1 million were gifted to the Wade Agricultural Research Institute, to the State Library, and the house and surrounds went to the University of Adelaide. And it in turn gave Martindale Hall to the state in our Jubilee 150 year to guarantee its preservation for all. And so you're welcome to come and look around. You'll see, for instance, the billiard room and its original Bowman fittings. And no, it's not Mintaro slate on the table. In this, the smoking room, you get a sense of the squire of this century, John Mortlock. Widely read, very well travelled. This is English oak. It's a little writing desk, a secretaire, 1700s. Look at the elaborate carving in this oriental cabinet. It's teak. Inside, curios from all over the Orient, from his travels again. And this is exotic. Chainmail, very tough here, lacquered leather. This is the helmet of a samurai warrior. The vestibule of Martindale Hall. Could have been a bit daunting if you'd been invited up for the weekend, one of the parties that the Bowmans and the Mortlocks often threw for people from the city. But these days, of course, it's ours, and so you can call in any day of the year except Easter and Christmas and have a look around downstairs and up. Evenings, things are different. You can book for dinner and then you can stay in one of the family bedrooms. Now, Saturday night, the rule is groups of 10 only, but obviously not a problem. They're booked ahead for about a year. Any other night of the week, as you can see, dinner is served in the dining room, of course.
Yes.
Entrees, ladies and gentlemen. It's a trio of seafood and a white wine reduced cream sauce.
At last, Thank you, Les. Oh, okay. Thank you, Les. No. See, Les, where is he? There he is. Les has been I did bring a nice one. Now, Les has been the butler here for about 7 years now, haven't you, Les?
7 years, yes.
And that's because he and his wife, Carol, are actually the lessees. And Carol cooks these sumptuous 5-course meals, not counting, of course, the chockies afterwards in the drawing room. And it's served, as you can see, on, this is the Mortlock table. This is a mahogany table, fully extended. And it is also served, I guess, as if we are dining with the Squire of Martindale Hall. So if they can ever get any of us to leave, next week, by the way, I'll be searching for the fire in the stone at Andamuka. And before we leave here, the young Melbourne couple, honeymooning here, just left, wrote in the visitors book, thanks to Les and Carol, they've had a few days of abundant pleasure. Thank you very much. See you next Sunday, 5:30 on Postcards.